Welcome to Reflect and Resist, exploring anti-Black racism through live actor simulations, presented by Live Actor Simulation at Ryerson, LASER, within Experiential Learning, a primary resource in the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, and featuring honored guest, Karen Arthurton. I'm Victoria Murdoch, Administrative Assistant and Simulator for LASER, and I'm going to start off by acknowledging the land that Ryerson rests on. Toronto is in the dish with one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon is a treaty between Absasagas and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. I'd like to now introduce our Director of Experiential Learning, Anita Abraham.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Victoria, and welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday afternoon before a long weekend. For those of you who were able to join us for the first workshop, you'll know that this workshop builds on our last one, where we were exploring what is it to do live actor simulations in the classroom in a remote era. And as we dug deeper into that, one of the questions at the end started to highlight the issues that we're seeing in this time, and specifically around anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism. And the question was about how can simulations start to address that in the classroom? And so I thought Karen had just done such a brilliant job of answering that question in that workshop. And I wrote her afterwards and I said, you know, I didn't realize until you started speaking how critical this is in this moment in time, and what a gift it would be to be able to share what that one question was in a much longer form. And so that was kind of the birth of this workshop. And so we're so grateful to Karen for agreeing to take us through what a simulation would look like in a classroom. And what we're really hoping for here is to equip folks to start to understand how they could use simulation in their own disciplines to start to unpack the issues around anti-Black racism. And, you know, people on my team will have heard me say many a times that I was starting to get tired of how cliche it was to say that COVID was unprecedented. But then what we started to see, some of the greatest protests of our time in the midst of the greatest health pandemic, what we were seeing going on in our Black community was precedented. This is something we've been seeing through all of time, through all of history, and there is a rising up. And as educators, as an area that thinks about how our students are going out into the world, how they're experiencing our world, how we can equip them for this world, we've got a real responsibility and an opportunity to use the classroom as our way to really start to change the conversation and to help people feel like they can take on these issues feeling educated and equipped. And so that's what we're starting to hope through this classroom and through this workshop. And so I had shared with Karen that one of my goals through this workshop, I started to reflect on my own experience. I'm currently in my third degree at my third university, and I just realized that this is a conversation that is long overdue. It's a conversation that has been shut out of our classrooms. It's been a conversation that has been silenced for much too long. And so today we're just really proud to be one strategy in a classroom about how you can talk about anti-Black racism and to use simulation as a way to do that. And so I just wanted to say thank you for joining us. Welcome. And our team is here to support you in any way that we can as you continue to do this work. And I will pass it back over to our hosts.
Thanks so much, Anita. I believe Catherine and Jeff are going to introduce our next special guest.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Turner. I am one of the trainers, writers, and facilitators in live actor simulation at Ryerson in LASER. As a trainer, what I do is I support the actors who are trained to come into your classroom or into a workshop. And then I work quite intensely with instructors or workshop facilitators, because I notice there's quite a few staff members who have signed in today that may be looking for workshops within their own areas. We work with you to support you as trainers, that we make sure that we meet your learning needs within how that simulation runs in your classroom. As a writer, I was extremely privileged to have been invited to create the NIOC family for Social Justice Week a number of years ago. I was very privileged to do this, and you will meet one of the characters created today in Peter NIOC. I'm turning it over to Jeff.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for attending today for this very prominent and poignant discussion, which is going to be led by Karen Arthurton, who I'll introduce formally in just a few moments. I'd like to take a second just to further what Catherine has said. I'm one of the trainers here at Laser, and as Catherine pointed out, we work very diligently with you to ensure that the classroom learning needs are met. We'll take the time from the point that you look into our catalog or reach out to us to find a simulation to help prepare you as the professor in the facilitator role to ensure that your class can follow through the simulation with you and help you prepare your class for the simulation itself so that it is a smooth delivery. I'm very fortunate to have been working with the team for a number of years and very vested in the final outcome. The students have an interactive tool that gives them hands-on practice, helping them to apply what you teach them and prepare them for the real world circumstances. And this, of course, is one simulation that opens up a greater dialogue and will hopefully give you all a taste of how you may apply this to your classroom. And with that said, I want to extend a special thanks to Karen Arthurton, our guest, for volunteering and bringing this forward to us as an idea. We're so grateful that you did, Karen. And with that said, for those of you who may not know Karen already, a formal introduction. She has worked full and part-time as a contract lecturer with the School of Social Work since 2011. And prior to teaching, Karen has worked with youth and youth-serving professionals for over 25 years. Her teaching strategies include participatory teaching, music, storytelling, and spoken word. The classroom for Karen is a space where learning is a shared experience and the lived expertise of both instructor and learner are vital. Karen has taught transformative social work practices for over 9 years and loves the hands-on component of this course. This simulation, the simulation of Peter NIOC, has been a staple simulation used to explore and discuss anti-Black racism, and in partnership with Laser has been crucial to the execution of the simulation and others. COVID-19, for Karen and for us at Laser, meant working swiftly together to move the simulations to an online forum so that we could carry forward with this vital and important work and open these discussions up to our classes. It's been a definite journey, Karen. I turn this over to you to lead us and our participants through this workshop and the simulation involving Peter.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you, Laser, for this, for today. It's phenomenal when we have an opportunity to actually follow up. Our first segment looked at the use of live actor simulations, especially as we quickly shifted over to virtual learning and virtual teaching. And I know for myself, the word Zoom was something, me and my nephew would talk about in terms of look at the car go, zoom, zoom. And I quickly learned that Zoom was going to be the forum for which we engaged in the simulations live. It gave students an opportunity to get a sample of what virtual counseling might look like. And in this age of pandemic, the timing, is there. So if anything, students were awarded the opportunity to kind of add to their repertoire what it meant to support, service users, participants live. Not only did they have the challenge of working with one, both of my final 2 simulations were group simulations, one looking at gender identity and the other looking at a youth group. So they were engaging with 4 to 6 people. So it was a beautiful journey, which, I am incredibly grateful for. Okay, so just some disclaimers before we move into the content of this, where we're going to take you through a simulation. I'm going to take you through what happens after the simulation, which is where the discussions and the deep reflection for myself and my students occur. So my disclaimer acknowledges that I enter this conversation and I enter teaching and living from a place of humility. I, am on a constant journey of learning and growing. And I do not profess to know all the answers at all. But what I hope to do is to remain open to the possibilities and to continuing these conversations, which are so crucial. I recognize that this is an ongoing process, and as much as I know, I don't know. As Jeff mentioned, I'm a learner and I'm an instructor. As much as I may teach students, students teach me by far more than I could even ever imagine. And it's through their courage of sharing their narratives that I'm able to engage in the classroom. That I implicate myself in terms of learning about myself, recognizing my light skin privilege, looking at my role and responsibility as an educator and as a human being, that I have work to do and will continue to do. That the firsthand accounts of anti-Black racism come from my students, come from the young people that I had the courage of sharing the narratives, of maneuvering a system where anti-Black racism was infused within the education system, policing, harassment. I saw firsthand what it did to I'm going to say my young people, because they are a part of my family and they are a part of my community, that my young people, the youth, their families and their community members experienced, and very much painful, but also an opportunity to infuse love along the way so that we support each other in the struggles. Also looking at from the perspective of schools, we ran a suspension program very early on because we recognized very quickly the disproportionate number of Black youth that were being suspended and expelled disproportionately. We would shift to kind of 20-day expulsion, which was not, equitable across the board. I looked at police harassment, assault, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to give you an activation warning, is that the use of the language may be activating for folks. There may be some swearing, there may be throughout, and certainly for myself and my work, the use of a variety of words, that do not induce harm, and if words do come up, it's an opportunity for us to engage in a conversation as learning moments. And I would also like to take a moment to recognize those we have lost. I've lost a number of young people along the way, and we are, in the fight of our lives in terms of looking at the folks that we have lost at the hands of police violence. So here's the journey. We're going to take you through the journey of the simulation. And I often say to students, your work begins when you get this learner's portion. So this learning portion comes from LASER and provides students with a synopsis of what they're going to be engaged with. It's very much meant to be short and sweet, because what may happen is that folks will already start to say, oh, who's Peter? What, the police came? What, the police, why did the police, and that's where the learning process begins. And I ask folks, just read it and be with it. And sometimes, and I encourage them, don't read into it. And they say, I started to think and I did this. And I was like, come to the simulation with your heart. Come with a presence of your goal, among many, to uncover the narrative of Peter. So they receive this learning portion, and I usually give it to them 2 days prior, no more than that, because sometimes it can be with you for a number of days, and you worry about it. So this is the learner's portion, which says you are the social worker at a local community center. Last week, Peter Nyoke booked an appointment with you. When making the appointment, he said, a police officer suggested that I speak with a social worker. You're in a meeting with Peter for the first time in your office. So when we look at kind of switching this to virtual, this would be a meeting via Zoom. Next, please, Jeff. Thank you. Okay, So with the simulation, there's also preparatory work that happens, right? So when we were in the classroom, I would meet with my students ahead of time, and they're usually in groups of, it really depends, 4, 5, 6. And just to get them kind of like, the goal is to use the core social work skills, you know, open-ended questions, reviewing confidentiality, use of language, body, our social locations, our subject positions, you know, really kind of looking at uncovering the narrative while simultaneously taking care of ourselves, right? Depending on the simulation, it can be activating for folks. It can hold a very special and deep place in our hearts in terms of these narratives are not just, you know, a simulation. They are lived experiences that either we have experienced, our family members, our community members. So I really, you know, prepare folks to think about how do you take care of yourself during the simulation, but most importantly, after the simulation. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So with this simulation, I'm looking for folks to engage with an introduction and a welcoming, which I'm going to show you in a minute, reviewing confidentiality, looking at duty to report. Each student goes for 10, 15-minute periods of time. In previous years, when I had smaller classrooms, they would go for 2 rounds. But as class sizes increase, they're now going for 10, 15 minutes. And they're playing one social worker. So it's not like, you know, one comes in and then we say stop and a new, you know, they're the same social worker, although they're bringing their unique selves to that social work role. So where, you know, on the outside kind of observing, they may think, oh, you know, I would ask. So when they have the opportunity to actually get into what we call the hot seat, they can ask that and they can redirect the interview. Right? So we're looking at uncovering the narrative and the use of counseling skills and the use of self. Jeff. Okay, so I talked about the post-sim, which is the kind of debrief and the check-in, self-care strategies, ways of dealing with triggers and activations, preparing for the presentation next week, which I'll talk about it in a bit, and one-on-one support. So I'm always there. And if the simulation, like any simulation, becomes too overwhelming for a student, it's too close to their narrative and they find that they can't make it through, or for all kinds of varied reasons, I will pull them out. I am not, like, this is about challenging ourselves, but I also don't want folks to experience vicarious trauma. So the day of the simulation, I meet with my students, I check in with them. Again, this was live. I check in with them, and now what I'm doing is, because we did the last simulations via Zoom, I met with them via Zoom, and I'll speak a bit about the importance of kind of looking at a survey, because I want to be able to establish what the accessibility is in terms of internet, in terms of privacy, in terms of confidentiality. Have to take all of that into consideration and can't just assume that, you know, that folks can be online at that particular time. So I meet with them prior, and then the day of the simulation, then I meet with the actor. So I'll go outside, or I'll go into our breakout room and Zoom, and I'll connect with with Peter, who we shall meet very in a short moment. And I'll, you know, just touch base. How are you? How's it going? I have 5 students that are going today. Depending on, we can talk about the intensity, right? So it can be moderate, it can be intense. And depending on the week, I usually start off moderate. And then by the end of simulation 5, which in our final weeks, I usually increase the intensity. But then I'll ask, I'll let the simulator know, this is the intensity I'm looking for today. And then we go on. So as one of my mentors said to me, don't kind of like talk about it, show it. And on our first simulation that we conducted, we actually took folks through what a simulation would look like. So what I'm going to do is, as Peter and I get started, because I'm going to start you off, the other thing that I do with my students is the week before we start simulations, I put myself in the hot seat. So I ask for a volunteer from one of my students to to, go through a narrative with me. And I don't know anything about the background, but I'll show them how it is that they can engage with the simulation, how many times you can time out, because that's part of it, right? So if folks are kind of like, starting and then they're like, I'm not sure where to go with this, you time out. And you can say to your team, you can say to myself, and in some circumstances, I invite the class feedback. I'm not sure where to go from here, right? And folks can time out as many times as they want. Right? So the first social worker is the one to introduce, and I'm going to show you that component. So I'm going to now assume the role of the first social worker. I'm Karen, I'm she and her, and I am going to invite Peter into our virtual space. Welcome, Peter.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm not bad. How you dealing with what's going on in the world these days?
Just trying to get through.
Trying to get through. What does that mean? Trying to get through.
I mean, there's not much we can do besides just staying at home.
Mm,
So I guess just trying to cope with that.
yeah. Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. So before we get started, I'm wanting to know kind of what brought you here today. I got a little bit of a description, but I'd really like to hear from you. What brought you here today? But before I do that, let me just reintroduce myself. My name is Karen, and I use the she, her pronouns. I work at this youth agency, and I've been working with youth for about 20 years. So long time, huh?
Yes.
So, I can tell you that, youth are incredible human beings, and I love the work that I do. So just a couple things to consider is that, what you tell me today stays here. Okay. The only times I have to breach, this, confidentiality is if, if you're harm to yourself, if you're hurting yourself, or if you're hurting somebody else. And in that situation, I would be very transparent about what the process is and that we would be doing this together, right? So I put that out there as kind of, policy, but I want to assure you that what we talk about today stays with us.
So you're not
Any questions about that?
gonna tell the police anything, like unless I say something like threatening.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm also going to talk with you about what's going on. I'm not going to, the last thing that I want to do, and the last thing that I've often done with a lot of youth that I work with, is I don't call the police, right? Unless it's APSA, right? That's not my goal here. My goal here today is to get to know you, and maybe for you to get to know me a little bit.
Sure.
Was that okay?
I guess so.
You guess so, or you know so?
I know so.
Okay, that's cool. So Peter, what brought you here today?
I was told to come.
Okay. Can I ask who told you to come?
The police.
Okay. Okay. And they said what?
Like they said, we want to take you to this program. We think it'll be great for you, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
So here I am.
Okay. How do you feel about that? About being told by the police that you should come to this program?
Can I be honest?
Absolutely.
I feel like it doesn't really matter what I feel, because at the end of the day, if I don't listen to them, then, things could get ugly. So it doesn't really matter how I feel.
Mm. So it sounds like you feel like you're trapped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know this might be hard to believe because you've met me for 5 minutes now, but how you feel does matter to me.
I appreciate that. But I know you're supposed to say stuff like that, but I appreciate it.
Well, I know we, social workers sometimes, we're supposed to, but I hope that as we get to know each other a little bit more, that you'll learn that I don't say something for the sake of something, for the sake of saying it, right? If it's not coming from my heart, then I won't say it. But it'll take you time for us to get to know each other. Time. I'm now going to invite our first volunteer, who I believe was Elaine, to continue on with the conversation.
Peter, I'm wondering, because I really appreciate that you're here, and it means a lot to me because this is really how I really enjoy spending my time, and this is important that we're here. Can you tell me a little bit about, what brought you here? I know you mentioned that the police had suggested that you'd be here, but can you tell me a little bit about just a little more about that? Anything you feel comfortable telling me?
I mean, they told me to come. I showed up. I guess they feel like I'm at risk, something. So they said something like, I think this will be good for you to talk to somebody. So I'm sorry, I don't really know what to tell you. I just showed up, and that's really it.
It's a big step showing up, Peter. So I just want to say that I'm really glad you did that. And if you decide just to show up next time, you just want to sit and talk about whatever, I want you to know that you can do that. But I do care about you. And I know that, we've only met for a few minutes, and I also look different from the other women that you saw earlier. But I do want you to know that, and, that this is a place where I'd like you to be able to share whatever you feel comfortable. That word risk is it's only 4 letters, but it can be a little bit of a bigger word. And I'd like you to maybe tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
What it means to be at risk, or like what word risk means?
Any of that.
Well, I guess I get it. Like, after every sort of like tragedy, in a sense, like, you always think about the individuals involved and, how they're feeling and how they're coping with things. So I understand that, there's concern because, you care to a certain degree about how people are managing, I guess, traumatic experience, but sometimes it just feels more like covering your own ass or something. Or sorry, I don't mean to curse, but
okay.
Like covering your own self, like, do you really truly care what's going on with me? Because it's been so long since, everything happened, right?
I do want you to know, I care about how you feel. And when you say that, you feel like you're at risk, certainly I would love for you to talk about that. But if you're open to it, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, what you mean, by some sort of, I think you used the word traumatic, if I could recall correctly. And I know there's been a lot of that, and kind of overall, we're in a pandemic, and there's all sorts of things that people have seen. And we don't have that closeness with people that we can share. Are you willing to maybe talk to me a little bit about that?
I was kind of surprised, like they didn't give you like a file or anything on me, like you don't really know what happened.
To be honest, no, I don't. And I come into this really, I care about you, but I don't really care about the file as much. The file is, I don't actually have a file, but if I did, those are just words on paper. And ultimately, we're here now. And I'd like to hear from you, really. Not really too concerned about what other files there are, what other people have made of whatever incident that there may have been. But I'd love to hear from you.
Some things went down, and it's caused a bunch of strife where I live. and it's caused a bunch of turmoil in my family, and you know, I'm just dealing with it. I don't want to get into it too much like right now, just because it's hard to talk about. But I mean, it's just some things with the police just kind of destroying my life.
And Peter, I want to say, you know, that's really hard. You know, we all come from families, have been disappointed by our families, have been loved by our families, been hurt by our families. So, you know, it's I want you to feel like we can talk about that. You know, that you know, we can come in and out of that conversation. It's not always easy to take an entire suitcase and try to unpack it right away. But maybe we can do this, you know, if we can, over a number of sessions, you know, talk about that. But I want you to know I'm really open. I don't have any files, and I also don't care to see them right now.
No, I totally believe you. Like, I appreciate that. I have a problem trusting people, because, you know, since everything went down, like, you know, you hear people saying like, oh yeah, we got you, man. Like, we're gonna be there for you and everything. And, you know, they don't show up. So, you know, just forgive my skepticism, or however you say that word. But I appreciate it.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm not sure if I'm getting a timeout. Okay, great. Time. Thank you, Peter.
All right. So there were some pieces that Peter described, and Elaine, P.S., by the way, wonderful. You know, this whole idea of at-risk and at-risk discourse, that's something to unpack. You know, we might think about the day-to-day, like, how are you functioning? But he also said, it's too early to discuss this right now. The police destroyed my life. That's a big clue there that, you know, and I encourage my students to think about the timing of when we get into this, right? Because at this point, we want to begin establishing a little bit of trust and build a relationship. So I will turn it over to you.
Hi, Peter. How are you? I know that we've been sending you to different social workers. I hope that you're getting a chance to settle in and see the work that we do here. How are you feeling today?
Yes, I'm feeling sunshines and rainbows, if that's what you want to hear.
Well, I want to hear how you're feeling, and, you know, I want you to feel comfortable to be able to share that. I know that you were saying that, you know, you feel it's a little early to start talking about some of the things that were really difficult, and I want to honor that, and I want to respect your sort of boundaries. You know, I don't want you to feel like you have to say anything that you don't feel comfortable with. Like, this time is for you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. We were talking, I know you were talking about risk earlier, and I know you don't want to get into the incident and all the things that happened, but do you agree with, like, the police's assertion that you're at risk? Like, their opinion? You don't, eh?
I mean, just because I'm a Black kid that, you know, went through some shit, you know, it doesn't mean that I'm at risk, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like they keep treating me different. Like, they treated me one way before things went down, and now it's almost like they're treating me how they should have been treating me after. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the most, like, hurtful part, is like, you know, this is bullshit. You know what I mean?
So you feel like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, like, them saying you're at risk is, like, kind of them trying to deal with it after the fact.
Yeah, 100%. Because, you know, they realized that it was their mistake finally, and things shouldn't have went down the way they did. So now it's like, okay, well, we gotta look good in the public side. We can't let Peter grow up and have this image of us in his head. You know, we need him on our side. We need all Black people on our side. You know what I mean?
How does that make you feel?
makes me feel like, you know what, it makes me feel worthless in a sense because I wasn't valuable before. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a kid that's just trying to go to school and just trying to live my life and trying to figure out things and you know, help like make my parents look good. But now it's like, you didn't see me as that before, so why are you trying to fake it now? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, that's their opinion. Like, I'm really interested in your opinion. You know, are you able to, like, you said like you had these goals and these things you were trying to do before. Do you still have those same goals?
I mean, I can't really think about it too much just because, you know, my life's changed now. But yeah, I mean, you know, I would love to continue going to school and, you know, being on my way to becoming a mathematician. Believe it or not, I'm actually really dope at math.
I can believe it. I'm
Appreciate
terrible at math.
I started wearing the glasses. But I can't really focus too much because I can't really go to school anymore just because I got to take care of my mom and you know, things at home.
Well, I know that we can't change what happened, and it had a big impact on your life, and I'm very open to hearing like that when you do feel more comfortable. But I can tell you that, you know, as a social service organization, that we can support you in trying to meet your goals, and also in being able to deal with what happened and get you back on that track, because it's not really about what the police want or think about your life. It's what you think about your life and where you want your life to go.
I mean, that's true and all, but they don't set the world up for people like you and I, you know what I'm saying? Like, even though we live in Canada and it's a little bit better here, it's the same narrative over and over, right? Like, this changes the game for you, you know what I'm saying? And as much as we can sit here and try to, you know, encourage me, and I appreciate you, that's your job and whatever, like, it's not going to change the facts.
How does that make you feel?
It makes you feel angry because I'm just as valuable as anybody else. I'm just as good as my friend Kyle. You know what I mean? Like, I've never smoked a day in my life. And, you know, I try to be a good person. I try to go out and be respectful of everyone. But I'm still a black kid to them, man. Like, I'm going to get searched before everybody else just because of this.
That really hurts, eh? Oh, okay. I'm getting the timeout. Yep.
Fine. Okay. So I'm going to ask you just to kind of hold what you're feeling right now. And I believe we have one more volunteer who is Crystal. And at this stage, if we were in real time, Crystal would be kind of wrapping things up, but we're not going to play it that way today. So given what you've heard, Crystal, where do you want to take this now? Some big statements being released by Peter. He's starting to share some stuff, and there was a connection that he made with Hamid around race. Where do you want to take it?
Yeah, I would take the next few steps to sort of unpack. I think, Ahmed, by the way, you did an amazing piece.
Absolutely.
And everyone before. We've really pulled out what's going on with Peter. At this point, I think I may try to ask some questions around what happened before and after the referral, just so I can get a sense of where Peter feels where in this specific situation he felt marginalized.
Big question, Crystal.
Okay, so go for it.
Go for it.
Okay. Hi, Peter. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I know you've seen a couple of workers, and I know that can't be easy in and of itself. But my understanding is that you've like many Black people have had a very hard time lately. And my question I want to get to you talked a little bit about the difficulty in just being sort of seen as, you know, the Black kid. And you're also your referral to come and speak with a social worker, and how that in itself makes police look good, which I think puts a burden on you that is unnecessary. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm. So you would agree that as a Black person who lives with anti-Black racism, you're also expected to, like, some sort of be a badge of how to be a good Black person. And even when you do that, you're still at risk. Is that fair?
Exactly. It's like, you know, no matter what I do, I'm always going to be seen as this and have to act like this, you know, and it's just it's pity.
I can see from like how you know your shoulders are down that this is really sort of, if I may, it's made you feel a little bit beat down. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, they might as well just beat me up too, you know what I mean?
Okay, so if some of the words have had a physical manifestation in, and also maybe even not even maybe, but also psychological, how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your mom and your, you know, your willingness to do your best for your mom and your parents. Have you discussed any of these feelings with them?
Well, my mom is pregnant, so you know, it's just I don't want to like put any extra stress on her, and you know, she's already still kind of grieving and whatnot. So I try not to like put a lot on her. I don't really talk to anybody. I just kind of go to work, come home, you know, keep my head down, and that's pretty much it. I'm not a really exciting person. I'm sorry.
No, and don't worry. We're all quite boring when we're at home. I just wonder, Peter, if you like. I get it. I think what I'm seeing, and I might be like projecting, and you can let me know if I'm incorrect. But you're a man, and you're feeling like maybe that you have to hold on to this as part of being a man, like almost like this is part of being a Black male, just dealing and soldiering on with this. Is that true?
I mean, yeah, like, you know, I don't my dad's not around anymore to kind of lead by example. So, you know, I'm just trying to just hold on because, you know, I don't want to end up like him. You know, I have police mistake what I'm going through for some shit, you know what I mean?
May I ask you a question? May I?
Sure.
Before the referral, right, before the police suggested that you should see a social worker, could you give me a little bit of context of what that day was like? Like, did they just come up to you, or was there something difficult that happened, or mistaken identity? Was something like that?
I mean, I was kind of surprised when they came with a referral because like they stopped me so many times. Like I it's not even a thing anymore. It's like routine. So, you know, I just kind of put my hands up, just waited. And then they kind of came like, no, we're not here for that. And yeah, they just kind of said, you know, we recommend that you go through this. I know this officer, like he doesn't come around as much, but like when he sees me, he tries to talk to me and stuff. So, you know, he said like, you know, we think this would be good for you. And he apologized for not really being around too much because he had things going on. And I don't know, I guess because the interactions with him and I have been all right, I'm just kind of like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to go anyway, but now that he's saying something, I won't, if he's suggesting it, I won't be so resistant, I guess.
Okay, so in many ways, he's the good cop, and you kind of trust him, but
I don't know.
more, maybe a little bit more than the other cops. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I don't know if I would ever say cops are good. I think that there's cops that do their job, and then there's cops that do their job well. So maybe he's one of those guys that do his job well, but I mean, I don't know any different. Like, he hasn't wronged me yet, so you know, I don't want to put that out there if I'm trying to get that treatment back. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to give respect to get it. I guess so.
Okay. Is there anything that you think that I should know about, you know, just how you're feeling right now? Like, you seem to have a lot of on your chest. Are you able to cope with that? Do you need support of some kind? Is there a way I can help you?
Good question.
I mean, with all due respect, ma'am, like, I don't know if you can give me the support I need. Because, you know, with my dad not here, I kind of have to help out with bills and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm not in the right mindset to ask for charity and stuff, but, you know, I guess just talking is fine. Like, this is pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so well, first of all, I want to let you know that, you know, asking for help is many times something that we in our community, we do help each other, but we are afraid to ask for help because it means that we don't got our act together. But I just want to let you know that asking for help is a sign of strength. And while I think you might have success with a male counselor, because I think that you can identify with a male and you can probably, you know, share this discussion around, you know, not feeling like you have a role model. And I think that's what might be missing for you. I'm still here and happy to help you. And I think that we can coordinate some resources with, you know, my instructor, Karen, around how to help you. And yeah, you're right. You have a lot on your plate, so you don't have time to be in therapy 2 hours a week. But maybe there's a way that we can support you along the way, because we do care about you. And quite clearly, your Blackness, your identity, and the person that you are matters. And it's very important. You may feel like you're just one of many people, but each of us matters. And the fact that you're here means that, like, there's this poet, her name's Audre Lorde, and she said we weren't meant to survive. So every time I'm feeling down, I remind myself that my people got me here. And you mentioned your mother and her child coming soon, and that's such a rich experience that I know you want to be part of. So I just want to make sure that you have enough heart to sort of get through. And I want you to continue finding some support. If it's not me, we have a whole host of people who can support you. And if there's not a match, we will continue to keep looking. You are important.
Thank you. I don't even know what to say. That means a lot. I guess one of the things that I want is just justice, you know? Because, like, they took my pops from me, man. Like, they just murdered him, you know? It's not fair.
I do understand. It doesn't help you to see that, you know, I too have experienced that, but I do want you to know that, yes, it's true. Black people are losing their lives and their freedoms daily. And in the day-to-day of, you know, North American society, I don't think people really see that. And we're walking around kind of like walking wounded and still expected to do our best in society, and also don't cause any trouble. But I get where you're coming from, Peter. I just think you need a little bit of help through that journey. It is very important to get support, because it's imperative just to keep you going. You talked about the need to keep going, and a little bit of support takes a while to get going, first of all, to ask for, and then to make the right match, but then also to feel comfortable and then like move through a couple of issues. And I see that you're taking on the family breadwinner role, probably way before your time, right? And you want to support your mom, but you also want to, also keep growing as a young adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got a lot of balls in your court, as they say.
Yeah. I never understood that saying because I don't know how to play basketball.
I'm from tennis, so maybe that wasn't the best.
No. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No.
I don't really play sports, so I never understand. But I think what's funny is I told a cop that one time, and he like looked at me all weird, like what? You don't play basketball? I was like,
right. So there's stereotypes, right? And when we walk down the street, they're assuming when they ask you things like, "Are you going to the ball court?" and you're like, "No, I don't play ball," and they look back at you like, "What are you talking about?" Then they think you must be up to something else, and you're really just trying to get home to get, your math equations done, so you can cook food so that mom comes home and has an easier life. I get that. There's a very narrow viewpoint of what it means to be Black. Then it narrows further when you talk about gender, being a man and being a woman, being gay, being straight. It, the how do I say, the pinholes for us, like they're not very wide perspectives. But we're changing that. I think the whole world is changing that right now.
Yeah, it's just they gotta stop.
Yeah, the cops gotta catch up.
You know what I'm saying? Like they gotta just give us a chance to achieve something. You know what I mean? Like I can't believe that things like what happened to George Floyd still happen. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like even like what happened with my dad, like, him being in the conversation too, is like it's almost it's unbelievable. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't hear such violent things like that happening to like people who are not of color. You know what I mean? And sometimes even people of color, like there's hundreds of things that we don't even know, like what's going on in the Native American community, right? Like crazy.
I definitely agree with that, and that's why solidarity is so important, because we are in this fight together. This is really about white supremacy, and it's about fighting that, and that means we need support and allies. We need people who get it, people who are willing to say, you know what, that's not okay. And even though I'm like, let's just say a white person, not me, but someone else, I recognize that's wrong and I'm going to fight for that. One thing I will tell you, Peter, is the racism, the anti-Black racism we experience, it's not our doing. So we can't undo the problem by ourselves. So I think that it's important that you have a Black counselor. I think it could be male, it could be female. But what I really think is that in addition to that, we need other people to undergo their own work. And that's the key. Because the problem, Peter, is not you. And it doesn't mean that you're absolved from any wrongdoing. You're taking active steps to heal yourself. But when you go out into society, the police represent a whole body of institution that is historical, that is pervasive, that is anti-Black. You're just one person against that system. So I need you to remember that when you're going, and I'm sure that's not on you, that's you, I'm sure you've thought of that. But what I need you to do is remember that when you go out into the community. Remember how to take care of yourself. And I heard time. So Peter, great talking to you.
Oh my gosh. So I'm like, I don't know, folks, I'm seeing all of this stuff in the chat, and my apologies for cutting this off. If anything, you can see how you become immersed in this, in the narrative. And I gotta tell you, I'll save my feedback. Because at this point, what we do is you can see how this continues to go through the whole 3 hours, right? And I'm gonna turn it over to Roshan to talk about how he felt during that interaction, which is an opportunity to provide our 3 phenomenal participants with some feedback in terms of how he felt when you said. Welcome, Roshan.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. And to all the volunteers that jumped in, like, you know, I want to say thank you so much, because usually what we say at the end of simulations is that my job is hard, but your job is 10 times harder because you don't know what I'm coming in with. Yeah. So the fact that all 3 of you wanted to jump in, you know, I really thank you. And I appreciate you just understanding that it's a character and it's not a personal thing of like, if I don't respond to you a certain way, it's just all kind of built into this. But I'm kind of shocked because usually when I do this, like, you know, it's always with students that, you know, are kind of learning and, you know, they don't always hit things. So I'm always trying to like give them stuff to prompt them. But like, I'm kind of speechless. Like literally there's moments where I was like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, I literally don't know what to say. But it just, as Peter, like, I just felt very connected with and very cared for. And I know that that's what Peter's looking for, in a sense, because when he comes into this, he's not sure, you know, what he's supposed to do, or like, you know, it's just, oh, well, the police set this up, so everybody is in cahoots with everyone. So, you know, I'm not really going to pay this no mind, but, you know, everyone made me feel welcomed, made me feel engaged and comfortable to share my story. And I really appreciate the chances to respect my space, because all 3 of you said at one point, you know, I don't know what's going on and I don't want to make you feel a certain way. So, you know, I thank you all for that, because it made me feel very focused and very open to sharing my story. Yeah, like I'm trying to pick out moments, but it's just everybody kind of did their thing, and that's how I know that everybody's a professional. Yeah, no, I think everybody did such a great job, and it, like, even as Peter, it's always a unique experience playing this role, and this one is just like, yeah, like, you lit a fire under me. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I do matter. Yeah, let's go. We can do this. I don't gotta be sad.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So I guess I'd open up first to ask the volunteers if there's any questions you have of Roshan, of his character, and how it felt to be in that role. What did it feel like to engage in this simulation? I'll ask the volunteers, and then I'd like to open this up a little bit more to other participants in the audience to talk about how they felt well, as watching, because as much as this is a role of the students who are engaged in the simulation, it's also all the observations that the you know, the participants who are watching the simulation, how are they feeling? What are they seeing? What assumptions do they need to challenge? So I'll invite that, but I'll start with the 3 courageous and phenomenal participants who just went to talk about what was it like to be in the role and to play the, you know, the role. And I say the role because I think once we're engaged in the conversation, you forget this is a simulation. It is human to human, right? Connecting from this beautiful space of love to, you know, I am heartbroken to hear we've lost your father, that your mother is alone.
Ahmed, did Elaine want to join us back again, just so we can see all 3 of you at the same time?
I think one thing that did obviously strike me is that, you know, I volunteered because I wanted to kind of break the ice and, you know, wanted to ensure that people felt comfortable, and I felt like I should do that as a leader. We do actually run a social work program. I think Ellen is here, one of my staff members who's great. So I just wanted to at least, you know, step up to the plate. I think certainly one thing I did realize is that, you know, as I was getting into the role, and then as I saw, you know, just what Ahmed and Karen were, Krista were able to do, is that, you know, getting that preference of really, you know, he would probably prefer a black male. And you know, there was, you know, that attempt for me to try to make that connection, you know, which can be hard, but at the same time, you know, I think that certainly, you know, in whatever role we are, you know, we're never going to hit it right on that, you know, that we are that person that is the ideal. And you know, this is kind of the thing about life, which is why I think it's so important to be able to have representation. And representation really matters. So as I was getting into this and realizing, oh, you know, following up from Karen, who, you know, obviously did a great job kind of getting into the character, and then realizing, you know, I'm very different in obviously my, just even the way that I look and my ability to relate to Rashawn. So that was something that I kind of realized within the first couple of seconds was, okay, you know, actually, this would really help if it was a black male, because I'm not sure what I can do, but I'm going to do my best because I think this is important and this is my job. And, you know, I really want to make Rashawn feel comfortable. And, you know, it was really kind of thinking, you know, how do we provide that connection to our students, which is what we face every single day. You know, how do we provide some way of just making you feel comfortable, finding a connection point, knowing that, you know, we may not be mirroring their experience. So anyway, I just wanted to just put that out there that, you know, it was something I realized I was getting into the character.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for the other participants, how did it feel?
I'll go next, I think. For me, it was really important that Peter, because like Peter was talking about how he felt when the police were saying that he's at risk, that there's all this discussion around Peter, and he was focusing on the way people were viewing him and how he should be feeling and how he should be thinking about these things. And for me, like, it was really important that I get Peter's take on other people's assessment, because he also indicated that he doesn't want to talk about sort of the incidents or how he feels about them and that sort of thing. And I think, especially like as a black man, I know that like you're constantly being told how to feel and how you should think about things. And I'm like, I just wanted to create that room, and that, so I tried to speak less often and try to give him like room to give his opinion, and that like his life, and to create a bit of continuity too. Like there was a life before the incident that he's not comfortable talking about, and that there's life after, and that we don't have to talk about that incident, but we can talk before and after, you know, and his assessment of all the other people. Because I just imagine that Peter doesn't have the same opportunity to like get his take on these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
That was my focus.
I thought you did beautifully. And for Crystal, what was it like for you?
Well, I gotta admit that I feel that Ahmed and Elaine really set me up well.
Yeah.
You did, Karen. Yeah. When I arrived with Peter, my concern was just trying to pull out, is there anything that he wants to leave at the table or get off his chest? And I think he brought some stuff out that we hadn't heard of before. And for example, when he mentioned that, you know, there's a cop in the area who, I mean, he didn't go as far to say trust, but he did say that he was open to listening to this individual. That made me feel like Peter might know that there's some issues for him, but he was reticent to, you know, take that from a police officer, because, you know, he might feel there's an agenda behind it. Nevertheless, he decided to be brave enough to go forward and ask for the help. And I think in the discussion between us, he felt like, and I mean, based on what he said, it felt like, thank you, I'm able to, you know, discuss these things. And Peter is demonstrating what a lot of Black men and Black women, but particularly in his case, Black men, are facing. He said, I'm trying to be a good guy. Yeah. And it's almost like the narrative is, you know, by default, he's not a good guy. And then that speaks to the society at large, right? And as he mentioned, you know, the very narrow view of what type of Black guy he is, right? He could either be a baller or he's possibly a drug dealer, but his space in the open world has to be defined for the police, or else there's a problem. So, I mean, in this simulation, what I learned is that is that Peter, like all of us, is extremely vulnerable when he goes outside. Yes. And we didn't even add to things like COVID and, you know, the current, like he did say that, but not explicitly. And I just, I don't know, as a counselor and as a parent, I felt like Peter needs so much more support, and I wanted to encourage him to keep coming.
Absolutely. So well said. So well said. Is there any feedback folks have? I'm seeing our chat is like on fire, which is incredible. Is there anything other folks want to say in terms of the simulation or what they were feeling during the engagement before we move on to kind of looking at where I take students from here? Yes.
May I just say one more thing is that I think that like Daryl put it in the chat, like we really need to, as part of our, you know, anti-Black racism strategy, is really educate and put funding behind Black male counselors and scholars, as much as we want to do that for grade schools, etc. But I saw during the simulation that Peter connected with Ahmed more easily. And maybe that was intentional, maybe it wasn't, but that's what I as a observer saw. And it just speaks to the point that you need reflection. You don't always need reflection in the counseling experience, but it does help.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, right? And in terms of like, I know that I supported a number of young Black men, and I could do so much. I could be there and I become auntie but there was a need for mentoring, for, you know, and it very much became a collective of care, is that we could all play a role in community healing. And that's what I came to learn. But I also came to learn of what I'm able to give and what I can't, and where I need folks in community. And, you know, part of the role in doing this work was relationship building with other therapists and other counselors. So I could be able to pick up the phone and say, Crystal, I have somebody. Could you see this individual? Knowing that there's a waiting list, knowing this. And because of our relationship, it was like, absolutely send young person over. And that went so far. But I got to say that the list was very small in terms of who I could refer people to. Yes.
I think that I really appreciate the conversation on representation. It's absolutely crucial and important and relevant for all sorts of things. Like, you know, like unless you have that, like that particular identity, you may never know what it feels like to be looked at in a particular way. Just that facial expression that often is done unconsciously by people, right? Like, so there's so much in so many like big and little ways that representation is a particular knowledge and skill set onto itself. I just wanted to add to that representation alone often isn't enough, that we need to have people who have sort of critical analysis, who understand anti-Black racism, who understand equity, like anti-indigeneity, colonization, like feminism, that we understand like queer and trans theory and the lives of like people in the margins, addictions, mental health. Like we need people who have that knowledge, and that it is a combination of lived experience and being a member of those communities, and somebody who has a particular set of skills in being able to navigate the complex terrain of social like privilege and inequity, right? Like that those two things come together are incredibly powerful. And I think that having worked in equity all of my career, often people like want to put somebody like, you know, put the Black person in there and to deal with the problems and put it all on their shoulders. And often that's a failing strategy. And it needs to be broader, it needs to be more, it needs to be systemic, it needs to be thought out, our intervention, and representation is a key part of that. Having people who, like representation is a skill set. I don't think we talk about it, we talk about it in terms of lived skill, but if somebody has like equity training, knowledge, skill, then it's something that adds to like a professional set of skills, you know, and we need to think about it in that way. That dismantling anti-Black racism requires both representation and a particular way of thinking and critiquing and deconstructing and dismantling anti-Black racism or any form of oppression.
Agreed, because you can't just be black. And you
Absolutely.
can't just be male. There's so
Absolutely.
much more than that. I think that given
Absolutely.
your high level of skills, Ahmed, and the fact that you and I have been doing equity since, you know, Jesus was a boy, really helps in this situation. But I definitely feel that the client can be a little bit more at ease because they think you understand a modicum of where they're coming from, right? Even the black experience, we're not a monolith, right? You are ethnically two different black males, so that there's that. But I think it did. I saw Peter just bloom a little bit more, and we must pay attention to that. But you're right, it's systemic. And Funke said in the chat that it's every system, not just
Absolutely.
social work, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm cognizant of time. I can't believe how quickly time goes. And each time we engage in these conversations, I'm reminded of how important the conversations are. And I'm hoping before we end this, that this is not the end, that this is just a beginning of how we come together to continue to do this work. Some of the other things that we look for in the simulation are these skills that students are using. And the skills that my phenomenal colleagues engaged with was they interrogated at-risk discourse. We talked about intersectionality, which is certainly something that I engage my students with. They use validating statements, right? I hear you, et cetera, et cetera. Crystal named, and I encourage my students to name anti-Black racism. This is what is occurring. This is systemic. This is not you, right? That was important. I heard warmth, empathy, self-disclosures. What can I do? Talking about the justice system and a real sense of humanity, which I think is at the core of this work, is to be authentic. And when we don't know, but we're going to find out, right? And we're in this journey together. And I think that Peter left feeling like he would come back. And that's our ultimate goal, is to have a participant come back so we can continue our journey together. And we never, ever get through it all. We never do, right? So following the simulation, and I'm going to go through this very quickly so we have a couple minutes to kind of wind down. The students, and this is part of SWP 341, and that's a course for our students and my colleagues and so forth, right? My course coordinator has created all these phenomenal activities. So following the simulation, they engage in a debrief seminar. And that's 1 week later, where they address exactly what our participants were deconstructing, is to talk about theoretical considerations, right? To talk about and name anti-Black racism, to look at structural issues, to identify issues of power, powerlessness, oppression, to look at the use of self. Who are they? Their social location, their subject position. Who are they in the simulation, and what do they need to do, right, to unpack their own values, assumptions, biases, what work needs to happen so that when folks are engaged in work in the field, right, they're not bringing those biases and so forth with them, because that can be incredibly harmful to participants. And we have a reputation, in some circumstances of social work and its harms. And our hope is to reduce the harm, and it begins with the self-exploration. So following this, what I do is a mini lecture. So the students have had an opportunity to kind of deconstruct and look at what they would do the same, what they would do differently. Because we don't have time, I won't do it today, but what I often do in my classes is I use music. I'll use music or YouTube clips as a way of bringing voices into the classroom to kind of disrupt the traditional ways of teaching. It's also being connected to the lyrics. And if folks are, if we want to be in the moment in time and be present and authentic, then I ask folks to be with the lyrics. What speaks to you? What touches your heart? What relevance do the lyrics have to our simulation? And in this circumstance, I picked Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, which is a timeless piece, right? So I would spend a little bit of time talking about what folks felt and heard in the music piece before we move on to kind of my mini lecture. Okay, so just to contextualize this, and Catherine had talked about the privilege of creating the narration, that where Peter was taking us to was Peter was the son of Andrew Loku. So this simulation is rooted in the true story of Andrew Loku, who was murdered by the police, right? So his son Peter is talking about what it has been like for him following the murder of his father, and a mother who is now pregnant and trying to balance school with work and working at Tim Hortons and experiencing day-to-day examples of anti-Black racism from the police, from his employers, from schools who are telling him, you know, when he made the joke about mathematics and saying that folks didn't believe he could do it, like we're talking about the systemic racism that he's experiencing every single day. So it comes from the story of Andrew Loku. And what I talk with my students about is defining anti-Black racism using multiple scholarly works, right? We also talk about anti-Black Satanism, because when we talk about the intersection of race and mental health, we have to look at it from an intersectional lens. And those are just race and mental health are two of the intersections that we begin the conversation, but it is not limited to that. I talk about police brutality, and I make it very transparent to my students that I have had a contentious relationship with the police in supporting young people. That said, I do talk about the fact that there were a couple of police officers that really were trying hard to do the work. But I talk about the reality of where Peter, in that instance, internalizes all the messages, believing that it's their fault. And a lot of our conversations, whether it was individual or in a group work in our living rooms, would talk about the fact that this is systemic, right? We talk about the work that is ongoing, that's happening on an ongoing basis in terms of Black Lives Matter, the ways in which people are resisting, right? And we're surviving, right? And in very much in this conversations, Jeff, the next slide, is looking at a calling in. So what I encourage folks to do is to call in each other to a conversation, because the expert knowledge doesn't come just from the piece around the scholarly works. The expertise comes from my students in my classroom saying myself, my son, my child, my community members is experiencing this every day. So while this is a simulation, this is the everyday lived experiences of folks. And this becomes a collective of care so that we can work on some of the healing while looking at how we challenge the system as well. So the other thing I talk about is challenging language and stereotypes. In the full simulation with Peter, Peter uses some stereotypes in how he's describing people. And in my role, I would often say, hold on, Peter, can we talk about that for a second? You just called somebody, no. Can we stop and talk about that for a second? We talk about, again, the systems, policing, education, child welfare, all those components. We talk about complicity and privilege, right? What does it mean to have privilege? What does it mean to move away from guilt to action? What is it that we can do day to day to create change? Okay. The other piece that has really hit home with me for the last several years is grief and loss of a parent and a community member. How is it that, we don't have an opportunity sometimes to grieve one loss before we move into another loss? What does it mean? And I find that up until I had the most tragic loss of my life, which was my mom, that I stayed away from talking about grief and loss. And I found that more and more there had to be conversations about what it meant to lose community members, and where was our opportunities to grieve them and to heal, while simultaneously continuing to do the work. But it was important to engage with those conversations. And then most importantly is starting from the self, right? It's hard to kind of look at all the systemic pieces when we haven't interrogated ourselves, our privileges, our oppression, our power, our, you know, who it is we are. And often in that circumstance, I implicate myself in terms of my own ignorances, what I needed to work on, the reality of being a lighter skinned Black. Right? I illustrate, I hope by example, that I'm a work in progress and that I'm committed to a lifelong journey of reflection. Next slide, please. Okay. So again, the components look at self-interrogation, self-implication, social location, subject position, okay? Ways to resist on a micro, macro, and meso level. What are our responsibilities as future social workers, right? The sharing of narratives becomes the most powerful teachable tool that students share, and I've had students leave the classroom saying, I had no idea, and thanking their colleagues in the classroom for sharing those spaces. But in order for us to get there, you know, the initial work has to come on the onset of the first couple of classes of creating what I call a collective of care, of creating a safer space, because I don't know that there are any safe spaces, but certainly there are safer spaces. But that's a work in progress. Like, we don't do the deep diving. That comes gradually, week by week by week, as we get to know and trust each other a little bit more. And then the final piece that they do is they engage in a reflection paper. And this is an opportunity for them to really look at, if the next slide, please, Jeff. Okay, so to look at, you know, practicing what are case notes, right? So what was their documentation with Peter? So if I was to do my documentation, I would talk about, I introduced myself to Peter, you know, I discussed confidentiality, right? So those become my case notes. Then they look at the skills they used, right? And I name some in terms of, validation, empathy, self-disclosure, which a lot of the time we get discouraged to share parts of ourselves, but I think it's crucial to share parts of ourselves in order to humanize ourselves to our service users or to our participants, right? If I shared nothing of myself with my young people and with my students, I don't know that we would be able to have the relationships we have, right? Talk about the theories they employ. This is where I tell them, I want you to talk about anti-Black racism using scholarly works, right? I also want to talk about your lived expertise, how you used yourself, right? Your use of self, right? Your implication. And most importantly, through the process of simulation and now the post, what are the implications for practice? What are you going to do on an individual and systemic level to resist, right? And look at ways to continue the conversations around anti-Black racism, to look at their own implication, to look at where is it that they can find avenues of resistance. Even if it begins at home with somebody who makes a comment which is harmful, and they say to a parent, a loved one, a guardian, can we talk for a second? And my approach, again, is very much calling in, right? I heard this, can we talk about this for a second? Right? Or the I of kind of like, when I heard that, it really hurt me. Can we talk? And that's often what I did with the young people, as we had a joke, like we had a living room, right? And we would sit in the living room and folks would be playing music, and I'd heard, though, excuse my language, but I heard the word bitch for the 15,000th time, and I had to go, time out, folks. Can we talk about this? As a woman, I'm not loving this term. And we engage in a 20-minute conversation about why this term was not okay for me. Just for me, I'm speaking from the I experience. And it became these beautiful conversations to the point where youth would say, right? They say something that they knew was gonna like activate me to hope that they would get into a conversation with me. They didn't wanna say, Karen, I wanna talk about this, the system today and the ways in which teachers teach us like we don't know what we're talking about. Right? But they'd say something and I'd say, okay, so let's talk. 20 minutes later, sometimes we were yelling and we were in these passionate conversations and laughing and crying. And at the end of the day, I know that young folks and students say, I'll never forget the time when we engaged in this conversation. And I think that that is the core, is that we continue to engage in the conversations, and they're gonna hurt, right? But we can't move further. until we have these conversations. And I hope that at the end of the session, we've come to appreciate that simulations offer a phenomenal opportunity to engage in exactly what we're doing right now, having conversation as the starting point. But the starting point is not enough. We need to move forward. We need to look at the ways in which changes need to occur, individually, systemically, institutionally. But this is a good beginning. My hope before we leave today is what's next? How do we move forward as a collective would be my big question. So I'm going to stop yapping. You can see that once I get talking, my students will be like, oh no, here she goes. Here she goes. She's batting up a storm. And I often say that I don't talk a lot. And then I get going and you just get really passionate. And this is like, it matters. It's the simulation strikes the emotion. The emotion strikes the action, right? And one of the things I talk about often in my classroom is love. Right? Where is there room for love in the work that we do? This is not an objective for journey. I believe it's very subjective, that we bring our hearts and our souls into the work. And that's how I work in the field, and that's how I work in my classroom. And some folks love it, and some folks don't love it. But I find that I have to bring my authentic self. And that begins with modeling who I am and how I do my work, right? Knowing that my brilliant colleagues, community members, students, and young people teach me. And I have to remain open and humble to engaging in that conversation. So at the end of this discussion today, I would welcome folks reaching out, finding ways that we can continue to do this work, because 2 hours is just the beginning. We need each other now more than ever before, folks.
As the family, the Nyock family was created, the father in this case was named Daniel, and father to Peter and married to Grace. Grace and Peter are available as full characters. There's various ways that these simulations can be used in a classroom or in a workshop in terms of how those characters present. Like the Social Justice Week, we are absolutely open to actually creating custom simulation as well, in addition to the extraordinary catalog of simulation that already exists. So we have ways to support you in the work that you wish to do. We work collaboratively. We are never walking alone, and we need that collaboration, obviously. So we are happy to meet whatever needs you may have in terms of the work that you wish to do within your class. And it's not just social work. We work across the university, from the Ted Rogers School of Management to the School of Engineering, the theater school, even in terms of their arts management piece that's not necessarily around acting and directing, professional communication, FCAD, early childhood education, child and youth care. We are all across the campus in various schools, and we have found ways to support. We also do workshops and interactive workshops that could meet needs as well. So we are always flexible and open to whatever way we can provide extraordinary experiences for our students and for our faculty and for our staff across the university. So we are here for you, and I'm just turning it over to Jeff as he could add anything that I have forgotten and introduce us to the poll coming up. And thank you to Karen and Roshan. It was a privilege for me to see Peter in action. We are not allowed in the classrooms.
Oh, he's amazing. He's amazing.
We're not allowed in the classrooms, and Peter, just thinking about him makes me just weep. So to have him present, I was just so delighted to have the opportunity to see Roshan as Peter in action. Thank you, Karen.
Again, thank you, Karen. And as you've seen, Karen has used this simulation through her personal experience and how she guides into this specific topic with her classroom. And you, as a professor, as a workshop leader, can do the same. Interact with Karen, myself, Victoria will help you and guide you there. If you do have any other questions for us as a whole or for Karen regarding this, please reach out to us respectively. We'll get questions to Karen if you don't have her directly and connect you. But I also just want to add in to what Catherine has just said, that final point of please, you've seen how simulation can work to open dialogue. reach out to us with your thoughts on how you may want to address your class, whether it be on this or any other topic that you teach around or on, and we will help find a way in order to engage simulation, to engage your students, to bring learning to life.